Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Tomorrow News. Today, we will find out why tomorrow, May 6th, is one of the brightest holidays in the Christian calendar. Tomorrow is May 6th, and on this day, one of the most beloved and important saints is celebrated and honored, Saint George, because tomorrow is Saint George's Day. He is highly respected and valued in the Catholic Church, where he is also recognized as a martyr and saint, but he is most revered by the Orthodox Christians. We honor him holding liturgies, preparing sacrificial offerings and feasting on a lamb, and celebrating the name day of those named Georgi, Gergana and others. However, you may not know his full story, how he was declared a saint and why he is so loved all over the world. That's why we will start the story of the saint from the very beginning. We go back in time to the eastern part of the Roman Empire, somewhere near the end of the 3rd century. At that time, in the province of Cappadocia, which is located in present-day Turkey, a boy was born who would later become the future saint, George. His name derives from the Greek words ge, earth, and ergon, work or labor. The little boy was born into a Christian and noble family. His father was an officer in the Roman army, and his mother was an exceptionally bright woman from the then city of Diospolis, today known as Lydda. George grew up as a strong and healthy young man, and shortly after his father's death, he followed in his footsteps by joining the army. He demonstrated exceptional abilities, which helped him reach the rank of tribune, and according to some traditions, even a position in the emperor's personal guard. Speaking of the emperor, at that time, the title was held by Diocletian. He had taken power after Emperor Numerian, but found the Roman Empire in a very unstable period. This era in history is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. It was marked by frequent changes of emperors, often through assassinations, leading to economic instability, internal conflicts, and naturally external invasions. From the east, the powerful and ambitious Sassanid Persia attacked, while from the north and west came invading tribes such as the Goths, Franks, Alemanni, and others. All of this almost led to the complete collapse of the empire, and at one point it even split into 3 parts. However, Emperor Diocletian quickly took matters into his own hands. He introduced the Tetrarchy, a rule of 4, composed of 2 experienced rulers, the Augusti, and 2 younger ones called Caesars. The idea was that each Augustus would rule half of the empire with his Caesar, and when the Augustus grew old and retired, the Caesar would take his place and appoint his own successor. This led to smooth and bloodless transfer of power. Through these and other measures, Diocletian managed to gradually strengthen the army and stabilize the economy. However, he believed there was still another great problem within the empire. Until then, the established religion was the Roman one, the cult of gods. The Roman believed in a pantheon similar of the Greek. Zeus was called Jupiter, Hera was Juno, and Ares was Mars. According to this religion, the emperor himself was revered as demigod during his lifetime and as a full god after his death. Although the empire housed many other religions, they were all required to acknowledge the supremacy of Roman authority and participate in public sacrifices honoring the emperor. At the time, the number of Christians was growing. They began integrating into the army as Saint George and his father had, and even entered the administration, holding position in provincial governments. Diocletian saw this as a direct threat to the integrity of the Roman Empire. To him, Christians were rebels against the established order. At the very beginning of the 4th century, the priests of Apollo announced that they could not see signs from the gods because of the presence of impious people, that is, the Christians. This convinced the emperor once and for all that they were all enemies, and he took decisive actions against them. First, he ordered the closing or destruction of Christian churches. Then, he commanded that all Bibles be burned, and finally, he stripped all Christians of their civil rights. Diocletian even forced people to renounce their faith, and anyone who refused was arrested, tortured, and sometimes executed. Here, we return to Saint George, who, as we mentioned, was a man of high social status at the time, serving very close to Diocletian himself. When he learned about the persecutions, he did not remain silent, but stood openly before the emperor and professed his Christian beliefs. Imagine for a moment what a shock that must have been for the head of state. One of your favorites, a young, strong and ambitious officer, openly renouncing the emperor, the demigod. Naturally, Diocletian was furious and ordered that George be thrown into prison, where he was subjected to brutal torture. According to the accounts, he was stretched on a wheel of knives, immersed in lime, and even whipped with iron rods. His tormentors attempted to poison him, but the poison had no effect. Throughout it all, St. George did not give up. He endured everything and preserved his faith. Crowds even began gathering outside of the prison, hearing that the young man was surviving the unthinkable. It is even said that some of those who tortured him were so inspired by his strength and unwavering spirit that they converted to Christianity. In the end, the emperor realized he could not break the future saint and ordered that he be taken outside of the city and beheaded. Saint George accepted his fate with humility and faith in God. Thus, on April 23rd, according to the old calendar, or May the 6th, according to the new one, in the year 303, George was executed, but this only marked the beginning of his veneration as a great martyr. After his death, he was declared a saint and many churches began to be built in his honor. Now, you might ask, wait, what about the story with the dragon? Saint George is famous for that too. I saved this most fascinating part for the end. So, we find ourselves around the year 300 in the lands of ancient Libya, where there was a city called Silene. It was a beautiful, rich and lively city, but in a swamp outside its walls, a terrifying dragon has settled, spreading fear among all the people. This was no ordinary beast. With its fiery breath, it poisoned the air and the water of the entire city. To appease it, the townspeople were forced to offer it gifts, first livestock, then gold, and finally even their children, chosen by lottery. One day, the lot fell unexpectedly on none other than the king's daughter, who was to be sacrificed to the dragon. The young girl was led to the monster's lair, covered in tears and praying to the heavens. At that very moment, almost miraculously, a knight appeared, riding a white horse shining in golden colors. Armed with his spear and his unshakable faith, he charged toward the dragon and thrust his weapon straight into its heart. The creature fell lifeless to the ground. Thus, the whole city witnessed how the monster was defeated by a power born from the faith in God. The king asked Saint George to teach them, and the entire city of Silene embraced the Christian faith. Whether this story is true or legend, I leave that conclusion to you. But one thing is certain, Saint George was a man of indomitable spirit and unwavering faith. He stood against the whole world just to protect what was most important to him. That is why it is fully deserved that tomorrow we honor him and remember his story. And besides, the lamp is also a bonus, because tomorrow is Saint George's Day, and it is a bright day.